I'm Peter Gray. I'm WABA's Maryland organizer. Many of you know me from past stuff, and we are here to see if we can get better bicycling in Montgomery County. And we are organized to sort of give you some content, and then the meat of the night will be sort of towards the end. We will split up into breakup out groups to actually think of some campaigns that we might have WABA undertake in the coming year. So with that, I think we can move to the next slide. So here's what we're going to do right now. We're obviously doing the personal introductions via chat. Again, when you come on, folks, feel free to put whatever messages you want in terms of who you are, where you live, and what you're interested in getting accomplished tonight. We'll do a brief introduction to WABA and do a little bit of Advocacy Campaign 101. After that, we will break up into our various geographically sorted breakout rooms for a short exercise to talk about how we might approach a very specific fact set that we will lay out to you before we do that breakout. Then we'll come back together for some discussion about what are the tools that we need for a successful campaign. We'll sort of add to that a little bit of flavor in terms of talking about a few concrete examples of past campaign wins that WABA has had. And I just have to say in that regard that we got a big win today, thanks to the efforts of Garrett and a lot of people with the People's Alliance for Rock Creek and the National Park Service, much to our, well, I guess surprise, but also joy, is going to retain the closure to cars 7 days a week on Beach Drive in DC. So that's really great. So we'll talk about a few concrete things that we have done in the past, and then we will do this breakout group separation around 6:45 to brainstorm campaign proposals that we would want WABA to do in the future. And then we'll come back together as a group and sort of wrap things up. So moving on. So WABA has really sort of focused on creating low-stress bicycling networks. And what do we mean by that? We mean things like protected bike lanes, like off-road trails, neighborhood greenways, all the things that keep bicyclists safe and from car traffic, and also that make walking and biking along the corridors that those facilities exist safer for everybody. We want to sort of emphasize in the way that we talk about low stress networks that bike facilities only work if they actually connect people on a complete route. So we're striving to get as many networks put in place throughout the county so that people can get to things they need to get to on a daily basis: school, work, doctor's appointments, groceries, you name it. That's what we're interested in. And we also want bike routes that will be able to be used by people of all ages and all abilities, 8 to 80. That's what we're looking for. We want things that aren't just for people in spandex, but for people who of all ages and abilities, families, people on trikes, whatever it is, so that everybody can use these things well. Next slide. Here's just a little brief thing about how you can get more involved. Obviously, you all got our emails today, but you can sign up for the WABA action alerts at waba.org. You can go to the WABA action page to see what we're working on currently, waba.org/action. And you can see what events that we are putting on, events like this meeting, but also events that are like a little more fun, like the cider ride that we're doing this Saturday in Prince George's County, and that's at waba.org/fun. And then if you want to be up to the latest minute on every single thing that's going on in Montgomery County, email advocacy@waba.org and ask to join the Montgomery County Action Committee Google group. And so sometimes that's just an easier way for us to send quick messages out to the couple of hundred people who are on that list. Next slide. So we are very, very committed to making biking easier and convenient. And there's a bunch of different ways that we do that. We have learn to ride classes for people that haven't ridden before or haven't ridden in a while. We also have confident city bicycling classes, which help train people how to ride in traffic. We also are pushing things that will make it so that when you get to a destination, you'll have a place to park your bike. And ideally, that'll be something that is protected from the weather. There's a couple of facilities that are going to come online in the next couple of years, one in Bethesda, one in downtown Silver Spring near the transit center, that will be covered, that will be secure in a more meaningful way. And then we're also trying to do as much as we can to involve youth in the county. We are currently sort of slowly approaching a campaign to try and get universal bike education in all the Montgomery County public schools. And so these are things that we are doing so that biking is going to be easier and convenient for you all and for everybody else in the county. Next slide. So I now will turn it over to my esteemed colleague, Garrett.
Yes, indeed. And just real quick, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Garrett Hennigan. I'm WABA's organizing manager. I've spent quite a few, like Peter, I've spent quite a few years working in Montgomery County with advocates like yourselves. And tonight, we wanted to start with just a quick primer on what is a campaign, give you some advocacy campaign 101 basics, so that we have similar language and some similar, we're on the same page about, where we're starting. Well, just in case you have not thought of this, this is not the first Zoom meeting for everybody, I hope. But as we go through, please do keep yourself muted. Feel free to stay on camera to have some good participation. Feel free to throw your thoughts in the chat as you all are doing. Thank you so much for that. And we are recording this. So if you really don't want to have your face on camera or your voice on camera, you can feel free to stay off, and we'll be distributing this later. So what is a campaign? Campaigns are sort of a really fundamental aspect of how we get things done, how we make change in a particular place. There are lots of different kinds of campaigns, but a simple definition is that it's a series of coordinated activities, potentially lasting up from a couple of months to a couple of years, designed to achieve a social, political, or commercial goal. You can probably think of lots of different kinds of campaigns. You might have thought about, electoral campaigns or marketing campaigns. There's lots of different kinds. But a few notes about what campaigns are not. They're specifically not programs. So, not an education program that would persist for a long period of time and sort of continue ongoing in a similar form. A campaign has a clear beginning and a clear end. You start it, and eventually you win or you don't win. And when that happens, because it's specific. A campaign is about making something happen that wouldn't have happened otherwise. Your effort put into it achieves a result. And a campaign also is something that ideally and we'll talk more about this, gives people a sense of their own power, what they can accomplish when they put their mind to it. Over here on the right is an example of a network, protected bike lane network, low stress network that we fought for in Bethesda and is slowly getting built today. So what is a campaign? In short, a campaign is impactful, it is specific, and it has a clear target. And a few notes on what those mean. So a campaign is specific. There's always multiple solutions to a problem, but a good campaign starts with a focused path to solving that problem. So, and that focused path might be through something like legislation, or by, in another case, getting somebody elected, or by pushing for a specific change to a street design. In this example, just again, to define some of our terms, an issue is a specific solution to a problem. Again, there are many solutions to a problem, but in the context of tonight, when I talk about an issue, I'm talking about a specific solution to a problem. This photo is something that certainly people in DC and increasingly in Montgomery County we're experiencing, where we do all this fighting for protected bike lane, and then construction comes along and it blocks it. So the problem is that road work and building construction are closing these hard-fought bike lanes and leaving people who walk and bike with nowhere safe to go. So a campaign could be formed around this issue, where the specific solution is to pass legislation requiring that any construction that unavoidably must close a bike lane or sidewalk should be required to also provide safe accommodation. So campaigns are specific. This isn't just pushing for safer construction sites. It's a specific solution to it. Campaigns are also impactful, and here is a big, long list of some of the criteria you might want to be thinking about as maybe we're starting out a new campaign. The most important ones are, that a good campaign achieves a real improvement in people's lives. Once you're done with this campaign, you can see a difference that actually improves people's lives. They should also be widely felt, meaning affecting lots and lots and lots of people, and also deeply felt, meaning for those who it does impact, it makes a big difference for them. There's a ton of other criteria here. They should absolutely be equitable, especially these days. We know too much about the inequities of our transportation system and the region. So a good campaign is equitable. It should also be winnable in the time period that you have. Nobody wants to be fighting for the same thing and not get there for 10 years. You want to have wins along the way. So campaigns are specific, they're impactful, and also they have a clear target. Campaigns have to have a target. In this case, the target is a person or potentially a swing vote on a body who has the power to decide, to give you what you're looking for. This is the ultimate decision maker with the authority to say yes, and for that to be a win. A campaign should always be focused on a target. There are often many targets, so important to be focused on the primary target. Having given a little bit of groundwork, we're going to dive into some of these concepts in more detail tonight. Should say that this is a pretty introductory training. We could spend a day or a week on some of these topics. We're going to do our best to keep it sort of light and moving forward. But before we do that, we wanted to give, we have people from around the region. We wanted to give you all a chance to speak up, meet some people near you, and also do some thinking. So Peter, do you want to introduce this?
So in the first in this breakout session, after we break out, we want you to introduce yourselves, see one another, and what you're all going to be from a same general area. And then I want to sort of introduce a thought experiment that you will deal with in the next 5-6 minutes in this breakout group. There were 2 deaths that have occurred in the last few years at the intersection of Tuckerman Lane, which is a county road that has two car lanes in each direction. And there's a very popular trail, the Bethesda Trolley Trail, which is used by hundreds of people every day. And there's a crossing there. And twice in the last few years, people crossing at that intersection have died because they've been hit by cars. At least one of the instances sort of involved the multi-lane threat. So you can see maybe one lane of cars stops. The person thinks that it's okay to keep going. The other lane doesn't see the person crossing, and the person's killed. And of course, that's something that some of you may be familiar with that happened at the crossing of the Little Falls Parkway and the Capitol Crescent Trail. The question that we want you to deal with after you introduce yourselves to one another is, how would you construct a campaign to make that intersection of Tuckerman and Bethesda Trolley Trail safe? And it's a very specific objective. You have to sort of try and map it out in terms of who, what would you want to do? What tactics would you use, et cetera, et cetera. And we're just going to give you a few minutes to talk about this now. And then when we come back and break out again later on in the session, you'll have a longer set of discussion to have about whatever campaigns you want in your area. So I guess with that, we should break into groups. And each group will have a facilitator. They know who they are and they can introduce themselves as such. But basically, the purpose here is just to get to know one another a little bit and then to talk for a few minutes about this intersection and how we can make it safer.
Peter, before we continue, can I ask you a question about this?
Sure.
Okay. The lights that are there, are those traffic lights or yellow lights that flash when people cross? What are those lights?
They're hawk signals, so they're not full traffic signals.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
All right, and just to set some ground, to set a time, we were aiming for about 6 minutes for this, so very quick introductions, and then throw out some ideas about that campaign. We will open up these rooms. You should be shuffled into a breakout room. If you are not, we will sort you out. But let's go ahead. See you there. And welcome back, everyone. I know that was very, very quick. Don't worry, we will be going back to those groups for some more detailed discussions in a little bit. Yeah. I hope that we at least got through introductions, and that we had some thoughts on how to approach a campaign for Tuckerman. Peter, anything to share before we jump into it?
No, I think that the discussion that the three of us had in my group was good. We sort of learned a little bit about each other, and we also sort of tried to focus in on, like everybody's asking, is it a county road, is it a state road? That makes a huge difference in terms of identifying who the target of the campaign is.
Awesome. Some of you are jumping ahead. That's exactly one of the right first questions. Okay, cool. And I suppose, Peter, one thing for you to think about is if we need to shuffle around any of the rooms. We had many people register, slightly fewer than that actually show up tonight. So we want to make sure there's a good mix of people. All right.
I think Peter said earlier, it's a county road. You don't need to, this doesn't need to be a mystery, does it?
No.
Oh, yeah, sorry. I had answered that in the chat, but good to say it in person. It is a county road. Yes, correct. All right. So with that sort of exercise in mind, we're going to spend about 20 minutes digging into a little more of the detail of how we might plan out a successful campaign for that location, but also really any location. So covering a couple tools for successful campaigns. And the big ones are power mapping, which is all about deciding who your target is and how best to reach them. We're going to spend some time getting the lay of the land, specifically for Montgomery County, answering that question of like who controls what and who do we go to. And then also talking about effective tactics. What are some of the effective ways that we can sort of put our group energy together to reach, to get our target, to actually notice what we're doing and change their mind. These are just some aspects of a successful campaign. As I said, this could be weeks long, but these are some of the important ones and a good way to get started. So power mapping. Power mapping is all about finding your target. If you recall, a successful campaign has a specific target in mind. A target is the person who can make a decision and get you what you're aiming for. Every campaign should have a target, a primary target, the person who can get us what we're looking for. But any target is a person, and that person may actually end up listening or considering the opinions of many other people. So critically, your target is a single person. They have a name. They have a history, they have interests, they have friends and family potentially. You may have multiple primary targets. I mentioned, for instance, Montgomery County has a county council, but you want to find the person who you need to change, whose mind you need to change. So on a council, we may have allies, we may have folks who are with us, we may have folks who are not with us, and there may be some swing votes. So you could construct a campaign around convincing that swing vote to go your way. The exercise of power mapping is really in thinking about that individual person, that named person, and what influence you or other people working on your campaign, what influence you have over that person or could build over that person. Influence can come in a lot of ways and a lot of flavors. There's electoral influence. People can literally vote for a person and therefore hold power over them. But there's also economic influence over, say, customers over a company. There's regulatory influence. There's political influence. So lots of different ways of influencing. The primary target's the person who can give you what you're looking for, but they may listen to a whole bunch of other people, and we call those secondary targets. These may be friends, they might be colleagues, they might be other elected politicians or journalists or staff. And then even outside of that is more public audiences, like, people who can vote, people who live in a particular area, parents at a school who say the principal might be thinking about. So that's a general introduction to targets. We're going to get a little more specific right now. So to simplify it quite a bit, quick thought experiment. We're going to put ourselves in the mindset of, let's say, an 8-year-old, and we have a singular goal. We're 8 years old. We need a bike, right? That's like a rule. So let's think about how we can get a bike. So if you need to picture somebody, I don't think she's 8, but a very cute bike. And what kid wouldn't want that bike? So we're 8, we need a bike. Let's think of some strategies. You can think of all the arguments. Well, my neighbor Jimmy has a nice bike. We could try convincing some different people. We could try to convince our family to get it. So we have a couple of different strategies. We also have like so many good arguments, we're saving the planet. It's transportation. You don't have to drive me around, whatever. So many good arguments, but, and here are some of them. But what we really need is to figure out, who is our decision maker here? Who's our target? Who can give us what we're looking for? So I want you to think about that for just a moment. Maybe you can throw out in the chat, a quick idea. Who is probably going to be our decision maker here?
Yeah, parents.
Yeah, parents. Okay, great. So let's power map our family. Who's our primary decision maker? Well, I think, for purchases, for approved activities, I think this is usually pretty clear. It's one of a couple people. but for me growing up, at least, it was my mom. So I got to convince her. So the thought experiment is, who does my mom listen to? Well, we don't have to drag this out too much. You know, this is, who does she listen to out of obligation or respect, or like family politics, right? So this second group would be our secondary targets. So maybe, you know, out of obligation, she listens to my dad, you know, out of family politics, she listens to my grandmother, all of that. So it's really a matter of who can help create pressure around this and who might we have greater sway over. So if we get dad and grandmother and uncle and maybe a teacher on board all saying, hey, mom, you should really get this bike, that could help. But it's not just the secondary targets either. We also have these public audiences, you know, groups that have sway over our secondary targets, and potentially our primary target too. So, you know, getting our siblings in on it, getting a friend group in on it, you know, the whole gang's going out for a bike ride. I need to join that too, creating pressure from multiple angles. And all of this would work even if mom had no obligation whatsoever to listen to me, the person who wants a bike. So this again is power mapping, and it's a really helpful tool to thinking about and understanding what all the relationships are of power. So as we're finding our single target, you know, think about what are all those relationships? How do they overlap? Who do we have influence over that might have influence over our target? So with that in mind, Peter is going to talk a little bit about who the key players are in Montgomery County. And as he is, think about how does, going back to Tuckerman and that crossing, you know, who might be our target there and what might be the secondary targets. So Peter, over to you.
So who are the key players? Well, of course, it depends on what road you're talking about. And I didn't even include like federal parks roads. There was somebody who died biking into Little Falls Park and Great Falls. And that's a whole other, you know, National Park Service. But the ones that we're mostly dealing with, remember, every road that you're on that has a number, that is a state highway. Maryland 97 is Georgia, Maryland 355 is Wisconsin, et cetera, or Rockville Pike, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so the key players in there are the Maryland Department of Transportation, the agency that is most involved with the maintenance and construction of the roads, whatever, is State Highway Administration, which reports to the Maryland Department of Transportation and the Secretary of Transportation, who of course ultimately reports to the governor. And then the people that sort of these secondary groups, so those are really the deciders in the state road context, but those secondary groups that can create pressure that actually, you know, with the example of Old Georgetown Road have been extremely helpful, are the Maryland state senators and delegates of that particular district. And you always have to remember when you're in the state context that those state delegates and senators really are focused on their district. So you need to know what are the geographic contours of the district. Does the road that you're trying to change go from one district to another, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the state roads. Next slide. County roads, that's everything else basically, except for within a park. And the county roads, obviously, that's the Montgomery County Department of Transportation. They're the ultimate decision maker. They do report to the county executive, but the county executive usually doesn't get into the weeds that much in these things. And so it's really Chris Conklin, who's the director of MCDOT, is going to be the one that you're going to be trying to convince to make a change on a county road. You also have to remember that very important secondary group, which funds the MCDOT budget, and that's the county council. And as Garrett said before, you want to look at, is there a district council member you know, say for instance, in the instance of things that happen in and around Bethesda, that's usually that has been the District 1 council member, who's Andrew Friedson, but that's going to change. The district lines have changed, and now Kate Stewart, who's probably going to be the District 4 council member, she will be involved in it. But then there's also the at-large members. There's the people who are on the county council transportation and environment committee. You know, Evan Glass is going to continue to be that with the next council and probably be the chair of that committee. So that's another secondary target that you have to think about. And then finally, you have these park roads and trails that are under the Montgomery Parks Department. So the closures on Beach Drive and Little Falls and Sligo, that's something that the County Parks Department did. And when there's a proposal to either build a new trail or repave a trail, that's something that the Montgomery Parks Department, and that's Mike Riley. And they do not report to the county executive. They're their own fiefdom. They actually report to the Montgomery planning board. You know, we all know sort of the tumult that they've been undergoing in the last year or so. But that's sort of when you're talking about a trail, those are the decision makers. And again, the secondary pressure group is the county council, because they also fund the Parks Department budget. And with parks also, they are overseen by the planning board, which doesn't always get into the nitty gritty of that, but they're another sort of secondary group to remember. Next slide.
I think that actually gets back to me.
Yes.
So yeah, and I think that the key thing here, you know, again, thinking about targets, is that each of these organizations have a specific person who's, you know, up at the head of it. And Peter talked a lot about the political relationships, but I think the personal ones are quite interesting too. A lot of these people live in specific places and may have neighbors, so can be influenced in all sorts of ways. So turning over, you know, we've talked about finding our target, figuring out who can get us what we're looking for, who can get us, you know, to the change that we're looking for. We have some tools to figure out, like, well, we're probably talking about some streets or maybe a policy thing. So it's good to know, like, what agency or what decision maker is at the top of that and who they might listen to. But how do we actually, you know, get someone to listen to us? That is where tactics come in. Very loosely, a tactic is an action that we can do to move our target. Lots of words here. A tactic is a general word for, you know, any activity that we can do, put effort into, that will move them. Ideally, and I should say by definition, if it's going to be effective, it should be focused on the decision maker. It puts pressure behind a specific demand. So it's not just pushing a general notion, again, of street safety, but it's pushing your specific solution to the specific problem that we're talking about. And it also advances your goals. There are tons of examples of ineffective tactics. I can't tell you the number of campaigns that have specific solutions to specific problems, but the tactics turn out to be sort of unfocused. How many times have you seen someone wearing a t-shirt around a campaign that was the only thing that they did? It may be a cool t-shirt, but it's probably not actually making any difference to the target, the person they need to convince. So there are sort of two categories of effective tactics, and those might run into, those may come into play depending on where you are in a campaign. If it's a short-term thing to just get something done, or a long-term campaign where you might need to really build up a lot of people power. So those two categories, generally, a good tactic will either demonstrate your group's power to the decision maker, or that tactic may educate and grow your base. A really great tactic might do the same, both things at once. Another helpful thing to think about is sort of the radio dial principle. We're always looking to do the most good with, or have the most effect with the least effort. So start with a really low volume, and then if that doesn't quite, get what you're looking for, you can turn it up, turn it up, turn it up. So tactics exist on a pretty big spectrum of high effort all the way down to low effort. But generally, any effective tactic, it's going to be specific. It's going to be specific to that issue. It's going to actually relate really well to the context and the decision maker. So an effective tactic for one target, one decision maker, may be completely different from the tactic that moves a different decision maker. And again, it really depends on the context that person is working in, what their politics are, or who they report to, or whether it's an election year, or all sorts of different things. So effective tactics. Of course, COVID kind of threw everything for a loop, because suddenly we didn't want to spend time indoors with each other. But just some examples. Again, it really depends on the context. So without doing your power mapping, without really having the lay of the land, you might choose different things here. But petitions are often really helpful. This is getting a petition drive to get many people signing on to a statement calling for something, a specific solution to a specific problem. This helps show your power, but it also helps grow and educate your base. And ideally, at the end of it, you are delivering that stack of petitions to your decision maker to show your power, to say, hey, we have this many people who ideally have some sort of relationship to you, who want you to do X. Letter writing is another effective one. It's largely just a more individualized version of a petition, but this is getting people to use their voice and direct it at the decision maker. These can be effective with elected officials. These can be effective with county agencies around particular decisions. But those are somewhat mundane. Further down the spectrum towards turning up the dial, you may want to look at turnout events. This is getting people in person to show up at the same place. Group rides, project walks, getting people to come into the same place and talk about an issue. And once you have that crowd together, you're also inviting your target so that they see it, so that they have to respond to this group, so that they see, this is a group that can mobilize people. Turning up the dial even more, rallies, protests, things like die-ins have been incredibly effective of late, both because of the horrible imagery of it, but also if you get a large enough crowd, it is very compelling to some elected leaders, to some policymakers, to some targets. And of course, you always want to make sure that the decision maker is seeing it, that they're there in person, ideally. Other tactics, if there are public hearings, it's always great to pack the room. That's just another sort of way of turning out. Not just numbers, but showing it, backing up your work with real bodies in the room. And visiting with public officials is always a great way of doing things too. You can be really choosy about who shows up and what relationship they have with the person. These are just some. There are tons and tons of tactics, but again, it's all context sensitive. I'm going to keep on skipping along. Now, during the pandemic, things changed a little bit, but petition drives and surveys and letter writing, these are all still very, very helpful. And now, of course, we're moving more towards being comfortable being in the same space and the same room and all that. But these are all still very effective. So if you have a moment, throw in the chat if you can think of some other tactics that you've seen groups use effectively, especially in Montgomery County. There have been a lot of big momentous decisions that were made by county council and others. So sound off, if you got any specifics to share, please do. And as you're doing that, Peter, I believe you are up.
So I'll be very quick about this. There's a couple of things. Last year, WABA staff put together a very specific budget proposal for the capital spending program that the county has. And we took an overlay of the Tier 1 bike master plan projects and did a geographic overlay of the equity focus areas, which are areas of the county that are less affluent and need a little bit more love. And we made a $110 million proposal, and through a series of meetings with council members and outreach to MCDOT and to the executive, we actually got the county council to approve, with the blessing of the executive, he sort of chimed in for the first time, to get $11 million put into the county budget that wasn't there before. So new projects in the pipeline to get built. We obviously have gotten networks built in Silver Spring and Bethesda. None of that happened without a lot of you being involved, sending emails, going to meetings, etc. We have transformed, we've helped to push the Parks Department to push the transformation of the intersection of the Capitol Crescent Trail and Little Falls. We even have gotten them to start to do snow removal on the Capitol Crescent Trail and on bike lanes. So what I guess next. So these are the things. We're going to go into the breakout rooms now for about 30 minutes. And these are sort of the questions that we want. The facilitators should have these questions in mind, but we want you to think about, what are the things generally that you feel affect you when you're trying to bike and walk safely in the county? What solutions would improve or address that problem? And what campaigns might address the concerns? Pick a campaign, define the issue, do some power mapping, decide the tactics, et cetera, and there'll be a way to sort of make a record of this in each group, and then we'll come back together and see what we've come up with.
Right. If I could just
So
jump
Peter,
in. And
I and maybe some other people from RBAC need to leave because this meeting is at the same time as the Rockville Bike Advisory Committee monthly meeting. So I won't be able to participate in the second breakout session. I'm sorry. So, but thank you very much for all the work you do. This you've been very effective, and we're delighted that you're in Montgomery County. Working in Montgomery County, and we look forward to working more with you.
So Nancy,
Rockville's included.
Nancy,
Likewise.
I was thinking maybe I could stay on to represent RBAC, and then I'll join it.
Okay, that
Yeah.
sounds great. And then you can
Give
give
a
us a little
report back.
update. Yeah,
Okay.
that'd be great.
Okay, great.
Okay, thank you, Linda.
You're welcome.
Would you bring the chat with you, unless Sophie may have already done that?
The chat with me. What do you mean?
You know, just
Copy and paste
copy
it.
the chat.
Oh, I don't know how to do that, but if somebody tells
All
me.
right, well,
I think we can probably help share that around afterwards.
Okay, that
Thank you
was
so much.
right. And
Okay,
people can
take care.
listen too. And I
Thanks so
may,
much for being with us.
yeah,
Thank you. This is great.
I'll
Very
try to
good
represent the
information.
city of Rockville as best I can.
Thank you, Linda. I know you'll do a good job.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
cool. Before we split back up again, and we will be going to the same groups, I wanted to give you all just a quick preview of the tool we'll be using, just so there aren't any surprises. We'll share this link in the chat so you all have it, but we'll be using Jamboard. This is basically a shared whiteboard, and it looks like this. You should all be seeing that. Basically, a couple of questions. Each group will have two sheets, they call them, and you'll see that each group is identified by their group number. But everybody can participate. So you can go over here and click on this button and write your idea down, so that you don't all need to be talking at the same time. And once you do that, then you get a cute little sticky note, which you can grab and bring around, sort of a group notes experience. And up here at the top is sort of the sheet selector. So each group has 2 sheets with your group number on them. And hopefully we'll be on hand to help out if that's too confusing.
Hey, Garrett, it's Jim.
Yes.
I don't know who's controlling the groups. My folks we were a group of 2 and one is left. So can you put me in with Silver Spring or somebody else?
Yes, I can do that happily. Apologies.
Okay. No, it was fine, but now it would just be me. So it's up.
Which group is, Jim, which group were you in?
I was Tacoma Park, but
Oh.
Greta, who was with me, is now bailing out. So she has to leave. So
And I think the Rockville group, so there were, well, maybe there's still 3 of us, so that'll work.
Okay, we'll see. I'll float around, and if we need to do some readjustments, we'll certainly do that. But yeah, hopefully it is now about 6:57. So we're gonna use, let's say, the next, Peter, 23 minutes.
Yeah.
To again put some of those campaign tools to use. Try to define a specific solution to a specific problem, and start thinking through, like, how do we who's our decision maker? How can we power map them to figure out our influence over them? And then what might be some tactics that would help there. So I will stop talking and get these groups set up. Starting now. See you there.
Yeah,
We ran out
Out
of
of
time and we
body
were having such a good conversation.
I'm so glad to hear that, and I do apologize for tearing you away. I was popping around to a couple of different conversations, and I could tell there were a lot of good creative juices flowing. Hopefully this serves as just the first step in many good future conversations. We did want to come back so that we didn't keep us all here much longer than we promised initially. So yeah, you should feel free to continue throwing your ideas into the shared Jamboard here. I can see there are a ton of ideas floating around in the various groups. This is so exciting. So yeah.
And this is the goal that we had. And of course, we are so happy that so many of you folks were able to sort of stick around for this. I hope, and any feedback that you guys have about the training portion of this is welcome. We certainly wanted to keep everybody engaged and try and provide some value in terms of new ways to think about these things. These are ways that WABA has been thinking about these issues for a long time, and we just sort of want to share the love in terms of what we think is an effective model. We will take this Jamboard, the things that you all created, and we will have that inform sort of a focus for us in the coming year. We also will, I think at some point still this calendar year, bring everybody back together and sort of present sort of a distillation of our thoughts about what we all created here collectively tonight. And clearly, if after this, if you don't have access to the Jamboard, feel free to reach out to Garrett and I. The last slide has our contact information. My email is the easiest one to remember. It's just my first name at waba.org. But Garrett, I'm sure would be happy to hear from people too. I guess, do we have enough time to sort of talk about, maybe we get a brief report from each group, Garrett?
I would love that. Of course, want to respect everyone's time, but maybe we have 7 groups, I think 6 groups now. If we could just run through, we can throw the Jamboard up on the screen and maybe give each group like 30 seconds to a minute just to share like what was one idea you came up with for a campaign, specific solution to a specific problem. How does that sound? All right, hearing all the nods, let's get to it. Should we go in reverse order? starting with group. We didn't have that many.
6. It was us. It was us.
Group 6. All right,
We're
right.
there.
And we don't have any.
Just didn't fill out our board.
Go for
We
it.
didn't. We were board losers. We lost the game tonight. We didn't fill out our stickies. But we took lots of notes. I took lots of notes, which I'll write up for you all. So I'll give you a very brief out. There were 3 things that the group from Bethesda identified. One is that the biggest problem in Bethesda is that the major roads, the ways that are the easiest way to get around, are simply not bike accessible. And we would love to change that to put some bike accessibility on things like Connecticut and Wisconsin. The second thing that was identified is that pavement conditions are often very, very poor in many of the side streets. So the main streets are really hostile to bikes, but the side streets that are supposed to be the designated bike routes often are really riddled with a lot of potholes and from frequent construction. And then there was also some complaint that some of the new bike lanes have not been very well designed. We came up with some ideas about roads that could be repaved, how they could be repaved, and how we could ask the county to change the way that it evaluates when roads need to be repaved. That if there's been a certain amount of construction, then an evaluation should be done on the road condition, and that potentially construction companies or development companies could be asked to pay a fee towards the repaving. Because right now the rotation of repavement is done, apparently from someone in our group had looked into this, and is done on a very strict timetable. And instead we think it should be done based on when conditions are unsafe. That's it for our group. That was the bulk. I tried to be really quick so the other groups can talk, but I'll write down those notes and send them to you, Garrett.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Good summary. And I like how there were some problems and also some specific solutions to them. We're next going to go to group 5. And since there's so many things on the board, I'm going to say pick 2 and 2. So 2 problems and 2 solutions.
Okay, so like the other group, this group was focused on Bethesda, and the state roads are really the biggest problems, that's where the injuries and deaths are taking place. And we decided sort of at the end of our conversation to focus on River Road, the primary target being M.SHA, and getting some support, hopefully from the District 16 representatives and the District 4 council member. We would like to see protected lanes on River Road, particularly between Little Falls and Western, and try and get the county and the District Department of Transportation to coordinate on facilities that would connect at that point. We think that there needs to be, there's a bunch of tactics that we looked at, but that basically we wanted to have a protected bike lane with significant physical barriers on that road. And, you can see all the different tactics that we talked about.
Awesome. So the specific solution being get the state to build a protected bike lane on a state route, and a bunch of thoughts on tactics. I love that. Thanks, Peter. How about group number 4? Anyone still here?
Yeah, I know for group 4, a lot of times there was there's a few different but we were kind of debating between, there's a lot of different issues. We were talking about 192, Capitol View on 192 and University Boulevard. But we ultimately kind of, because this is kind of the more relevant and being kind of with active projects right now, we ultimately talked about Colesville Road on 129, especially because that's kind of going in conjunction with the bus rapid transit and the Flash development right now. So a few things that we kind of mentioned, particularly with this, is that the county has allocated a budget specifically for some of the pedestrian improvements. So we kind of mentioned about trying to advocate for certain, how to promote or how to highlight to different, to highlight what needs to be done to like, so we know that particularly the state owns the road, but the county owns the sidewalk. We know that this runs through the county District 5. So I think this would be Lauren Mintz. So that would be Lauren Mintz. We know Will Jolando probably lives not too far away as well. So we probably, and considering this also a lot involves like Montgomery Blair High School and a few of the elementary schools nearby. We talked about probably helping to spread the word around the elementary schools to help promote safe kids walking in the area, and also walk in the area. And then I also kind of drew a little bit of from DC advocacy experience for probably also doing a lot of like bike ride, or just like a showing of just biking through just to highlight how bad that area is for bikes and pedestrians as well.
Awesome. A couple of things that I really love about what you were talking about there. First, you have a specific focus, a specific problem in a specific focus area, but I love the idea of piggybacking along a current opportunity. This isn't an idea out of the blue. This is the county already devoting funds and resources and time to focus on the corridor. And we can make a campaign to make sure that that improvement is not just for buses, but for walking and biking too. I love that. Another thing I really love is that you thought through some of the power mapping and thought about, okay, well, we know who our decision maker is. This is a state corridor, but also thinking through some of the secondary targets and even some of the public audiences. Schools have a lot of influence over elected officials, or schools and parents. So I love that. Great work there. Let's keep on rolling down to group number 3. Again, let's keep it snappy. But what do we got?
Happy. I think the rest of my group had to leave. So we talked about connections that run through Rockville between state highways, but along county roads. So particularly Randolph Road and Goody Drive. And we talked about, getting some sort of movement on what's in the bike master plan, getting funded for like the shared use paths and the protected bike lanes that are called for. And, figuring out how to best work between and collaborate with and build a coalition between like the Rockville Bike Advisory Committee and some of the other groups. And yeah, I think that pretty much summarizes it.
Great. Funding for us to fund the bike master plan. I like how specific that is. You can pick a street and say, how much does it cost? When's it going to get built? How do we get the money? I love that. Awesome. Let's move on to group 2. A lot of good notes here. What you got?
Well, our discussion thought about kind of 2 big buckets of changes that we would like to see, thinking kind of first about infrastructure. We have some bike lanes, maybe they're not protected. Even the ones that are already there isn't great maintenance. So kind of thinking about what that experience is like and who feels safe using those. And also thought about behavior, especially from drivers. How can we ensure that folks feel safe when they're on the roads with vehicles, including when that infrastructure isn't protected, or there are high speeds, or when you're turning across those vehicle lanes across a large intersection. So we had some really good discussions about what are some of those. And I think some of the solutions that we discussed get back to thinking about the broader environment, not just who are our targets, but also who is working on this already, who are advocates that we can work with to try to make some of these changes. So I feel like this is a great group to answer some of those questions, to think about who we should be connecting with, to think about, yes, already we've got these 2 big buckets of issues we'd like to address. As we think about those specific campaigns, we want to be thinking about the targets and who are the allies that we can bring together to work on that. And I will throw it out to the rest of the group to add any additional comments.
I think that was a great summary. Before we lose more people, I want to get to group 1 and call it a night. So group 1, what do we have?
I'm going to work off of the next page, which sort of narrowed all that down. As you can see, we had a great brainstorming session, lots of ideas, lots of problems, and lots of solutions. But one of the things we decided to focus on as a symptom of a lot of the issues that came up in the brainstorming session is that we're noticing that we're getting these beautiful protected bike lanes put in downtown Silver Spring, like Spring Street, and the 2nd to Wayne Avenue segments, but not many people are using them, and we're wondering why that is. And so some of the things that we thought might impact that is that, like, if you think about the 2nd to Wayne Avenue, those are both really steep hills. So for a not experienced, not strong cyclist, that might be intimidating. So getting people, providing incentives to purchase e-bikes may encourage non-cyclists to get around. We also thought that there may be ways to have better connections from some of the existing bike lanes. And we also wanted to do a survey of downtown Silver Spring residents to identify why people aren't using these lanes more often to meet their transportation needs in the downtown area. So, and then we were just starting to get to the primary and secondary targets and ran out of time. So I'll stop there for sake of time.
Awesome. Thanks so much for sharing. Sounds like definitely a big challenge, but a lot of different tactics, some of which might be a campaign all on their own. And sometimes that happens. Just as a quick aside, I have a brother who lives near downtown Silver Spring, and it wasn't until his family got an e-bike that he started biking his kids to school in downtown Silver Spring. So
it is very hilly.
yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Well, I think we'll wrap up there. Peter, feel free to jump in, but I just want to thank you all for your time and your amazing detailed thoughts, and for bearing with us in sort of this ramshackle, jumping from one topic to other training. Again, it was a light overview of some very heady stuff, and I think you all did a very good job of absorbing and coalescing it all. So I will put up our emails again on the screen. Feel free to get in touch. We will send a recording of this, trimming down a few bits, and the slides to you, and probably a survey so we can hear from you on what you might have wanted to hear more about, or suggestions. But thank you so much for joining us. And this is the start of something. We want you to keep on coming back.
I just want to add, Garrett did a huge amount of work on the slides. I want to thank him for his efforts, and all the people who agreed, sort of not knowing what the environment would be, to be facilitators. That was really helpful. And I do want people to, follow up with us if you have other ideas specific to the general, and we will take the information that we gathered tonight and we will make it into something that we hope that we will be able to follow up with you and other people who weren't able to make it tonight to have a more in-depth discussion about what we should do going forward. And the only other thing I want to add is that we are going to be trying to put pedal to the metal on whatever campaign we mount in the early part of 2023. So January, February, March, that's when we're really going to be focusing our efforts. And we hope that you will come to meetings, send emails, get other people to send emails, all that kind of stuff, to generate the energy that we need to make these campaigns successful.
Absolutely. Well, with that, I'll say have a great night, everyone. And go out for a bike ride sometime soon. Hope we see you at the Cider Ride on Saturday.
Yeah, and on Beach Drive.
Yeah.